Mother Bear guided a new resident through a baby's chart. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning mist hung thick over Pine Valley like a gray blanket that refused to lift. Zara Chen pressed her face against the cold window of the moving truck, watching the tall pine trees blur past in endless rows. Her stomach twisted with nervous knots as the truck slowed down, turning onto a narrow dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. After 3 days of driving across the country, she was finally here. Her new home. Her fresh start. The driver, an elderly man with kind eyes, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "First time in Pine Valley, miss?" Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. Everything felt so different from the busy city she had left behind. Here, the air smelled of pine needles and something wild she couldn't name. The silence was almost overwhelming after years of car horns and sirens. "You'll like it here," the driver continued, his voice gentle. "Folks are friendly, and the forest, well, it has its own way of welcoming newcomers." Something in his tone made Zara look at him more carefully, but before she could ask what he meant, the truck stopped in front of a small wooden cabin. It looked exactly like the photos she had seen online, but somehow smaller and more isolated than she had imagined. The nearest neighbor was at least half a mile away, hidden behind a thick wall of trees. As Zara stepped out of the truck, her boots crunched on fallen leaves. The silence hit her immediately. No traffic, no voices, just the whisper of wind through branches and the distant call of birds she didn't recognize. She had wanted quiet, but this felt almost too quiet. The cabin's front door was painted a cheerful blue, though the paint was chipped in places. A small porch wrapped around the front, and wooden wind chimes hung from the roof, making soft music in the breeze. It should have felt welcoming, but something made Zara hesitate at the bottom of the porch steps. "The previous owner left some things inside," the driver said, setting her suitcases on the porch. "Said you might find them useful." He paused, studying her face. "You sure you'll be all right out here all alone? It's pretty remote." Zara forced a smile. "I'll be fine. I needed the change." The driver nodded, but his eyes remained concerned. "Well, if you need anything, the Hendersons live about a mile down the main road. Good people. And remember what I said about the forest." He climbed back into his truck, then rolled down the window. "It welcomes newcomers in its own way. Don't be scared if that happens to you." Before Zara could ask what he meant, the truck was rumbling back down the dirt road, leaving her alone with her suitcases and a growing sense of unease. She stood there for a long moment, listening to the forest sounds and trying to convince herself she had made the right decision. The key was under a fake rock beside the door, just as the landlord had promised. As Zara turned it in the lock, she noticed scratch marks on the door frame. They looked old but deep, as if something with claws had tried to get inside. She pushed the thought away and stepped into her new home. The inside of the cabin was cozy but dusty. Sunlight streamed through small windows, revealing floating particles in the air. The furniture was simple but comfortable looking. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and built-in bookshelves lined another. Everything smelled faintly of pine and something else, something earthy and wild. Zara was carrying her first suitcase to the bedroom when she noticed it. On the small kitchen table sat a piece of paper, folded carefully and weighted down with a smooth river stone. Her name was written on it in shaky handwriting. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the paper. The message was brief. "Welcome to Pine Valley, Zara. The baby's chart is in the bedroom closet. You'll understand when the time comes. Trust the forest. Elena." Zara's heart began to race. Elena was the previous owner, the woman who had left so suddenly that she'd sold the cabin furnished and moved across the country within a week. The landlord had mentioned that Elena had seemed frightened about something, but he hadn't known what. Baby's chart? Zara didn't understand. As far as she knew, Elena had lived alone. Unable to resist her curiosity, Zara went to the bedroom and opened the closet door. Most of it was empty, but on the top shelf sat a small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in soft blue cloth, was what looked like a child's drawing on thick paper. The drawing was strange and beautiful. Done in colored pencils, it showed a forest scene with tall trees, mountains in the background, and various animals scattered throughout. But it wasn't the skill of the artwork that made Zara's breath catch. It was the symbols. Mixed in with the trees and animals were symbols she didn't recognize. Stars with extra points, spirals that seemed to move when she looked at them, and what appeared to be a map of some kind. Lines connected different parts of the drawing, and there were tiny numbers written in corners. At the bottom of the paper, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "For when the mama comes." Zara sank onto the bed, staring at the chart. Nothing about this made sense. Who was the mama? What kind of chart was this? And why had Elena left it specifically for her? As she studied the drawing more closely, she noticed that one section seemed to show the area around the cabin. She could make out what looked like the dirt road, the shape of the cabin itself, and the large oak tree in the front yard. But there were additions to the real landscape. Paths that didn't exist, symbols marking specific spots in the forest, and animals drawn in positions that seemed deliberate. A sound outside made her look up. Through the bedroom window, she could see movement in the tree line. Something large and dark was moving between the trees, too big to be a person. As she watched, frozen with a mixture of fear and fascination, the shape stepped closer to the edge of the forest. It was a bear. Not just any bear, but the largest bear Zara had ever seen, even in pictures. Its fur was dark brown, almost black, and it moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. But what made Zara's heart stop was the way the bear was looking directly at the cabin window, directly at her. The bear stood perfectly still for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, slowly, it raised one massive paw and seemed to point toward the cabin before disappearing back into the forest. Zara's hands were shaking as she looked down at the chart again. In the corner she hadn't noticed before, barely visible, was a small drawing of a bear. And next to it, in the same child's handwriting, were two words that made her blood run cold. "Mama's coming." The silence that followed felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Zara set the chart down on the bed and walked back to the window, but the forest edge was empty now. Had she imagined it? The bear had seemed so real, so deliberately focused on her. She pressed her palms against the cool glass, searching the shadows between the trees. That's when she noticed the footprints. Large, unmistakable paw prints pressed deep into the soft earth near the cabin's foundation. They circled the entire building, as if the bear had been investigating, learning the layout. But what disturbed Zara most was that the prints led directly to the front door and stopped there. She could see from her angle that something had been left on the porch. Her heart pounding, Zara made her way to the front door. She opened it slowly, afraid of what she might find. On the wooden planks of the porch sat a small bundle of twigs and leaves, arranged in a perfect circle. Inside the circle were 3 smooth stones, and what appeared to be a child's toy, a tiny wooden bear, carved with incredible detail. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every line of fur, every curve of the bear's body had been carved with loving precision. but it was old, very old. The wood had been worn smooth by countless hands, and there were tiny teeth marks on the ears, as if a child had used it as a teething toy. Zara picked up the wooden bear and immediately felt a strange warmth spread through her fingers. It was as if the toy held some kind of energy, some connection to something larger than itself. She turned it over and found tiny letters carved into the base. For Lily, with love. Lily. The name meant nothing to Zara, but it felt important somehow. She looked at the chart again, studying the child's handwriting. Could Lily be the child who had drawn it? But that didn't make sense. Elena had lived alone, and there was no mention of any children in the rental agreement. The sound of a car engine interrupted her thoughts. Zara looked up to see a battered pickup truck making its way down the dirt road. It stopped in front of the cabin, and a woman in her 50s climbed out. She had graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and wore clothes that spoke of someone who spent time outdoors. "You must be Zara," the woman called out, her voice friendly but cautious. "I'm Ruth Henderson. My husband and I live down the road. We saw the moving truck earlier and thought we'd stop by to welcome you." Zara quickly slipped the wooden bear into her pocket and walked down from the porch. "That's very kind of you. I was just getting settled in." Ruth's eyes swept over the cabin, and Zara noticed her expression change slightly when she saw the arranged twigs and stones on the porch. "I see you've had a visitor already," Ruth said quietly. "A visitor?" Zara tried to keep her voice casual. "I haven't seen anyone." Ruth pointed to the paw prints in the dirt. "Those are fresh, big female, by the size of them. She's been around these parts for years, but she's never approached a human dwelling before." She paused, studying Zara's face. Did Elena mention anything about the local wildlife when she left? Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "Elena left very suddenly. We never actually spoke in person." "That's right, I forgot." Ruth's expression grew more serious. Elena was troubled toward the end. She claimed she was seeing things, hearing things. My husband thought it was just the isolation getting to her, but I wasn't so sure. "What kind of things?" Ruth hesitated, glancing around as if she was afraid someone might overhear. She said the forest was trying to tell her something, that there were messages in the arrangement of branches, in the way the animals moved. She became obsessed with some old story about a child who used to live here decades ago. Zara's hand tightened around the wooden bear in her pocket. "A child? Before your time, before mine even. The story goes that a little girl lived in this cabin with her grandmother back in the 1960s. The grandmother was what you might call a folk healer, someone people went to when regular medicine didn't work. The child supposedly had a special connection to the forest animals." "What happened to them?" Ruth's face darkened. "The grandmother died suddenly one winter. The child disappeared the same night. Search parties looked for weeks, but they never found her. Some people claimed she'd been taken by wolves. Others thought she'd simply wandered off and got lost. But there were those who believed she'd gone to live with the forest creatures." Zara felt her mouth go dry. That's impossible. Maybe. But Elena became convinced that the child was still out there, still alive, still connected to the forest. She started leaving food outside, claiming she could hear a child crying in the woods at night. My husband wanted to call someone, get her some help, but before we could do anything, she packed up and left. The two women stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, both looking toward the dark line of trees that surrounded the cabin. Then Ruth seemed to shake herself back to the present. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you with old stories. I'm sure you'll find Pine Valley quite peaceful once you get used to it." She reached into her truck and pulled out a covered dish. I brought you some casserole for dinner. Moving is exhausting work." Zara accepted the dish gratefully, though her mind was still spinning with everything Ruth had told her. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful. If you need anything at all, our number is in the phone book. We're the only Hendersons in Pine Valley." Ruth climbed back into her truck, then rolled down the window. "One more thing, Zara. If you see or hear anything unusual, don't try to handle it alone. This forest has its own rules, and sometimes they don't make sense to people like us." As Ruth's truck disappeared down the road, Zara stood alone in the growing dusk. The forest around her seemed to pulse with hidden life, and every shadow could be hiding something watching her. She looked down at the wooden bear in her hand, then at the chart she'd left on the porch. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was impossible to accept. A child who had disappeared decades ago. A bear that left gifts. A chart that seemed to map something beyond the physical world. Zara went back inside and spread the chart out on the kitchen table under the bright overhead light. She studied every detail, every symbol, every line. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see that the drawing wasn't just a child's artwork. It was a complex map with layers of meaning that went far beyond what appeared on the surface. The symbols weren't random. They followed patterns, creating a network of connections across the forest. Some were marked with tiny stars, others with spirals, and a few with what looked like small hearts. The lines between them formed pathways, routes through the wilderness that no human trail had ever followed. And in the very center of the map, where several lines converged, was a small circle with a house drawn inside it. The cabin. Her cabin. Zara traced the lines with her finger, following them from the cabin to various points in the forest. Each endpoint was marked with a different symbol, and she began to realize that they represented specific locations. Places where something important had happened, or where something was meant to happen. One line led to what appeared to be a clearing, marked with a symbol that looked like a star, surrounded by smaller stars. Another led to what might be a stream or river, marked with wavy lines and tiny fish. But the line that caught her attention most was the one that led deep into the forest, far from any recognizable landmark, to a symbol that looked like a small house surrounded by trees, a house in the forest. Could that be where the child had gone? Where she had been living all these years? The idea was ridiculous, impossible. A child couldn't survive alone in the wilderness for decades. But as Zara stared at the chart, she found herself believing it anyway. There was something about the careful way the symbols had been drawn, the obvious love and attention that had gone into creating this map, that spoke of truth rather than fantasy. She was so absorbed in studying the chart that she almost missed the sound outside. It was soft, barely audible over the wind in the trees, but it was distinctly human. Someone was crying. Zara froze, her hand still resting on the chart. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable. A child's cry, full of loneliness and fear. It seemed to come from the forest, from the darkness beyond her windows. She went to the front door and opened it, stepping out onto the porch. The night air was cool and filled with the scent of pine and earth. She listened carefully, trying to locate the source of the crying. There it was again, coming from the direction of the large oak tree in the front yard. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she could make out a small figure sitting at the base of the tree. A child, hunched over with their face in their hands. Zara's heart began to race. She wanted to call out, to offer help, but something held her back. The child seemed somehow insubstantial, as if they were made of shadow and moonlight rather than flesh and blood. Then the child looked up, and Zara saw her face clearly for the first time. She was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with long dark hair that hung in tangles around her shoulders. Her clothes were strange, old-fashioned, as if they came from another era. But it was her eyes that made Zara's breath catch. They were ancient eyes, filled with a sadness that no child should ever have to carry. The child stood up slowly and began to walk toward the cabin. With each step, she became more solid, more real. By the time she reached the porch steps, she looked like any other child, except for those haunting eyes. "You found my chart," the child said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wondering when someone would come who could see it properly." Zara's mouth moved, but no sound came out. She gripped the porch railing to keep from falling. The child smiled, and for a moment she looked like the little girl she should have been. "My name is Lily. I've been waiting for you for a very long time." Zara's legs finally gave out, and she sank down onto the porch steps. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing, what she was hearing. This couldn't be real. Children didn't disappear for decades and then reappear looking exactly the same age. But Lily stood there, solid and real, waiting patiently for Zara to speak. "This is impossible," Zara whispered, her voice cracking. "You can't be. Ruth said you disappeared in the 1960s. That would make you old," Lily finished with a sad smile. "I should be old or dead. I know how it looks, but time works differently when you're between worlds." "Between worlds?" Zara's voice was barely audible. Lily sat down on the step beside her, and Zara was surprised to feel the warmth radiating from her small body. Whatever she was, ghost or hallucination, she felt completely real. "May I see my chart?" Lily asked gently. "I haven't looked at it in so long." With trembling hands, Zara went inside and brought the chart back to the porch. Lily's face lit up when she saw it, the way a child's face lights up when reunited with a beloved toy. "I drew this when I was 9, Lily said, running her fingers over the paper with reverence. "Right after Grandma Rose died. I was so scared, so alone. I didn't know what was going to happen to me." She pointed to various symbols on the chart. "These mark all the safe places in the forest, places where the animals would protect me." "The animals protected you?" Zara found her voice, though it still shook. Lily nodded solemnly. "Grandma Rose taught me their language before she died. She said I had a gift, that I could speak to them the way she spoke to plants and herbs." When the social workers came to take me away after her funeral, I ran into the forest. I was only going to hide for a few days until they gave up looking for me. "But you never came back." "I couldn't." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. "The first night I was out there, I was so cold and scared. I thought I was going to die. Then she came. She, Mama Bear, the one who left you the gift today. She found me crying under a fallen log, took me to her den, kept me warm. Her cubs had died that winter, and I think she needed me as much as I needed her." Zara looked out toward the forest, remembering the massive bear she'd seen earlier. "She raised you?" "She and the others. The wolves taught me to hunt. The ravens showed me which berries were safe to eat. The deer led me to fresh water. But it was Mama Bear who kept me safe, who loved me." Lily's voice grew wistful. "For the first few years, I was still completely human. I aged normally, grew taller, but something started changing when I turned 13. "What kind of changing?" Lily stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, gazing out at the darkness. "I stopped aging. My body stopped changing. It was like the forest itself was holding me in time, keeping me as I was when I first came to live with them. Grandma Rose used to tell stories about people who belonged to both worlds, human and animal. She said they were bridges between the two, necessary for keeping the balance. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "How long have you been like this?" 63 years, Lily said simply. "I've watched seasons change, watched the forest grow and shift. I've seen families of animals be born and die while I remained the same. Until recently, I was content with that life." "What changed?" Lily turned back to face her, and in the moonlight, Zara could see tears finally starting to fall down the child's cheeks. "Mama Bear is dying." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She thought of the magnificent creature she'd seen earlier, so powerful and alive. "What's wrong with her?" "She's old, older than any bear should be. I think she's been living as long as I have, held in time the same way, because she needed to take care of me. But something's happening in the forest, something that's disrupting the balance. She's starting to age rapidly and her body can't handle it." Lily sat back down beside Zara, and now she looked every bit the frightened child she appeared to be. "She's been trying to tell me something for weeks, but I can't understand. She keeps bringing me to places marked on my chart, keeps pointing toward the cabin. That's why I drew the map in the first place, so I could remember all the important places. But I never understood why she wanted me to remember this place specifically. Until I arrived." "Until you arrived," Lily confirmed. "Mama Bear has been watching the cabin for months, waiting. She knew someone would come, someone who could see the chart for what it really is, someone who could help." Zara looked down at the chart in her hands, seeing it now with completely new eyes. It wasn't just a map of the forest. It was a guidebook, a manual for navigating between the human and animal worlds. "What kind of help does she need?" Before Lily could answer, a low, mournful sound echoed through the forest. It was unlike anything Zara had ever heard, a cry that seemed to contain all the sadness in the world. Lily leaped to her feet, her face pale with fear. "She's calling for me. Something's wrong." Lily looked at Zara with desperate eyes. "Will you come with me? Please. I think this is why she wanted you here." Every rational part of Zara's mind screamed at her to stay put, to call for help, to refuse to go into a dark forest with a child who might be a hallucination. But she found herself standing up, folding the chart carefully and nodding. "Lead the way." Lily's face flooded with relief. "Thank you, but first you need to understand something. When we enter the deep forest, when we cross into their territory, you have to let go of human logic. You have to trust your instincts, your heart. Can you do that?" Zara thought about everything that had led her to this moment. The failed marriage that had left her feeling empty and lost. The job she'd quit because she couldn't bear another day of mindless routine. The desperate need for something real, something meaningful. "I think I can." Lily smiled and took her hand. Her fingers were small and warm, completely human. "Then follow me and stay close. The path I'm going to show you doesn't exist on any human map." They walked around the cabin to the back, where the forest pressed close against a small cleared area. Lily led her to what appeared to be a solid wall of trees and undergrowth, but as they approached, Zara realized there was a gap, barely wide enough for a person to pass through. "This is one of the hidden paths," Lily explained, releasing Zara's hand and stepping into the gap. "The animals made it, and they keep it hidden from human eyes. You have to want to see it to find it." Zara followed her into the forest and immediately felt the world change around her. The sounds were different here, richer and more complex. She could hear things moving in the underbrush, but instead of feeling threatening, the sounds felt welcoming, as if the forest was acknowledging her presence. The path wound through the trees in ways that defied logic. Sometimes it seemed to go uphill when Zara felt like she was walking downhill. Sometimes it curved to the left when her eyes told her it was going straight. But Lily moved with complete confidence, and Zara found that if she stopped trying to understand and simply followed, the path made perfect sense. "Tell me about Elena," Zara said as they walked. "Why did she leave so suddenly?" Lily's shoulders tensed. Elena was sensitive, more sensitive than most humans. She could sense that something was happening in the forest, but she couldn't understand what. The not knowing frightened her. What was happening? The balance was shifting. Animals were behaving strangely, migrating at the wrong times, avoiding areas they'd used for generations. Plants were growing in the wrong seasons. Elena felt it all, but she didn't have the knowledge to interpret what she was experiencing. They came to a small clearing where moonlight filtered through the canopy above. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, each one carved with symbols similar to those on Lily's chart. But these symbols were older, more weathered, and they seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Grandma Rose made this," Lily said reverently. "It's a place of communication, where the human and animal worlds can meet safely. Elena found it by accident one day, and it changed everything for her." "How?" "She could suddenly hear them. The animals, I mean. Not in words, but in feelings, in images. She realized that they were trying to warn her about something that was coming. But the messages were too complex, too foreign for her to understand." Lily knelt beside one of the stones and placed her hand on its surface. Immediately, the symbols began to glow more brightly, and Zara heard something that made her heart stop. Voices. Not human voices, but something deeper, more primal, the voices of the forest itself. "They're saying something," Zara whispered, moving closer to the circle. "I can almost understand." "You can hear them?" Lily's eyes widened with surprise and hope. Elena could only sense emotions, feelings. "But you're hearing actual communication." Zara nodded, though she couldn't explain how she knew. The voices weren't speaking in any language she recognized, but somehow their meaning was becoming clear in her mind. They were afraid. Something was coming. Something that threatened not just the forest, but the delicate balance between all living things. "They're talking about a darkness," Zara said slowly, the words coming from some deep understanding she didn't know she possessed. Something that consumes life, that breaks the connections between living things. It's been growing stronger, spreading from forest to forest. Lily's face went white. That's what's been making Mama Bear sick. She's been fighting it, trying to hold it back, but it's too strong for her alone. The mournful cry echoed through the forest again, closer this time and filled with more urgency. Lily jumped to her feet, grabbing Zara's hand. "We have to hurry. She's at the heart of the forest, the place where all the paths converge. If the darkness reaches there," Lily's voice broke. "If it corrupts the heart, it will spread to every forest in the world." They ran through the winding paths, branches whipping at their faces, roots catching at their feet. But the forest itself seemed to be helping them, clearing obstacles from their path, guiding them toward their destination. Zara's lungs burned and her legs ached, but she pushed herself to keep up with Lily's desperate pace. Finally, they burst into the largest clearing Zara had ever seen. It was perfectly circular, perhaps 100 feet across, and in its center stood the most magnificent tree she had ever imagined. It was massive, its trunk easily 20 feet in diameter, its branches reaching so high they seemed to touch the stars themselves. The bark pulsed with a soft golden light, and Zara could feel power radiating from it like heat from a fire. But the tree was in trouble. Dark patches marred its glowing bark, spreading like infection up its trunk. The grass around its base was withered and black, and the air itself felt thick and wrong. And lying at the base of the great tree, barely breathing, was the mother bear. She was even more magnificent up close than she had been at a distance, but Zara could see that Lily was right. The bear was dying. Her massive chest rose and fell with labored breaths, and her eyes, when they opened to look at them, were clouded with pain. Lily ran to the bear's side and threw her arms around the great creature's neck. "I'm here, Mama. I brought help, just like you wanted." The bear lifted her huge head and looked directly at Zara. In those ancient eyes, Zara saw intelligence that surpassed human understanding, love that encompassed all living things, and a desperate plea for help. "What does she want me to do?" Zara asked, kneeling beside them. "Look at your chart," Lily said urgently. "Look at the symbols around the heart. There has to be something there, some instruction that Grandma Rose left." Zara unfolded the chart with trembling hands. In the section that corresponded to this clearing, she found symbols she hadn't noticed before. They were drawn in a different color, a deep green that seemed to shift and move in the moonlight. As she stared at them, their meaning became clear. "There's a ritual," she said slowly. "Something about joining the human and animal spirits, creating a bridge strong enough to push back the darkness." "What kind of ritual?" Zara studied the symbols more carefully, and what she found there made her blood run cold. "It requires a sacrifice. Someone has to give up their connection to one world to strengthen the connection between both worlds." Lily looked up from where she was stroking the bear's fur. "What does that mean?" "It means," Zara said quietly, "that either you have to become fully human again, giving up your connection to the animals, or I have to become like you, giving up my human life to become a bridge between the worlds." The mother bear made a sound deep in her throat, almost like a moan of despair. The darkness was spreading faster now, creeping up the tree's trunk like spilled ink. "There has to be another way," Lily said desperately. "There has to be." But even as she spoke, they all knew there wasn't. The chart was clear, the ritual was specific, and time was running out. Zara looked at the dying bear, at the frightened child who had waited 63 years for someone to help her, at the magnificent tree that held the balance of all life in its roots. She thought about her old life, the emptiness she'd been running from, the sense that she'd never found her true purpose. Then she looked at Lily, who had sacrificed her human life to become something more, something necessary. "I'll do it," Zara said quietly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she looked up from the dying bear's side. "No, you don't understand what you're saying. You don't know what it means." "Tell me then," Zara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Tell me exactly what happens." Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of dirt on her pale cheeks. When someone becomes a bridge between worlds, they don't just give up their human life. They give up everything that makes them human. Their memories start to fade first, then their ability to speak human language, to think human thoughts. Eventually, you become something else entirely. You exist in both worlds, but belong to neither. Zara looked down at the chart in her hands, reading the symbols again more carefully. The green symbols were moving now, rearranging themselves to show her more details of the ritual. What she saw there made her stomach turn. "How long?" she asked. "How long before I lose myself completely?" "Grandma Rose said it takes about a year," Lily whispered. "At first, you're still mostly yourself, just with new abilities, but gradually the animal consciousness takes over. You start thinking like them, feeling like them. your human self becomes just a memory, and then even that fades away. The mother bear stirred weakly, lifting her massive head to look at Zara. When their eyes met, Zara felt something pass between them, a communication deeper than words. The bear was trying to tell her something important. "She says there might be another way," Lily translated, her hand resting on the bear's forehead. "But it's dangerous, more dangerous than the ritual." "What is it?" "She wants to show you something, but we have to go deeper into the forest, to a place where no human has ever been allowed to go." Zara looked around the clearing. The darkness was spreading faster now, creeping across the ground toward them like a living thing. The great trees' golden light was dimming, and she could hear other sounds in the forest, sounds of animals crying out in distress. How long do we have before it's too late? Lily looked at the corrupted tree, then at her mother bear. "Until dawn. When the sun rises, if the heart isn't healed, the darkness will spread beyond the forest. It will consume everything." Zara checked her watch. It was just past midnight. They had maybe 6 hours to find another solution, or she would have to go through with the ritual. "Show me," she said. But as they prepared to leave, the mother bear struggled to her feet. It was painful to watch the great creature move, each step obviously causing her agony. But she stood firm, blocking their path. "She won't let us go without her," Lily said. "She says this journey is the reason she's lived so long, why she found me in the first place. She has to be the one to show you." Together, they left the clearing, the bear moving slowly but with determination. Zara noticed that wherever the bear stepped, small flowers bloomed in her footprints, as if her very presence was fighting back against the encroaching darkness. The path they took was unlike any of the others. It seemed to descend constantly, leading them deeper and deeper into the earth itself. The air grew thick and humid, filled with scents Zara had never experienced. Strange phosphorescent fungi provided the only light, casting everything in an eerie blue-green glow. "Where are we going?" Zara asked, her voice echoing strangely in the underground passage. "To the source," Lily replied, "the place where all life began, where the first spirits learned to speak to each other. Grandma Rose told me about it, but she said only the animal guardians were allowed to enter." They walked for what felt like hours, though time seemed to move differently in this underground realm. The passage branched and twisted, but the mother bear never hesitated, leading them deeper with absolute certainty. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground cavern. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into darkness, and the walls were covered with symbols, thousands of them, glowing with soft inner light. But what took Zara's breath away was what occupied the center of the cavern. It was a pool of water, perfectly circular and so clear it seemed like liquid crystal. But this wasn't ordinary water. It moved with its own life, swirling in patterns that seemed to form pictures, faces, entire scenes that appeared and disappeared like dreams made visible. "The source," Lily breathed. "The birthplace of all communication between species." The mother bear approached the pool slowly, her massive paws making no sound on the stone floor. When she reached the edge, she lowered her great head and drank deeply. Immediately, her fur began to shimmer with the same light that emanated from the pool. "Drink," she said. Zara nearly fell over in shock. The bear had spoken, not in the mysterious animal language she'd been hearing, but in clear, perfectly articulated English. "You can talk," Zara stammered. "All guardians can speak all languages here," the bear replied, her voice deep and resonant. "This place exists outside normal reality. Here, all barriers break down." Lily was staring at her surrogate mother with wonder. Mama Bear, in all these years, you never spoke to me in human words. Because you didn't need them, little one. You learned our language so perfectly. But this human, she gestured toward Zara with her massive head, she needs to understand with her human mind what we're asking of her. What are you asking? The bear's eyes, ancient and wise, fixed on Zara's face. Look into the source. See what it shows you. Then decide if you're willing to make a different sacrifice. Zara approached the pool cautiously. As she knelt beside it and peered into its depths, the water began to swirl faster, forming images that made her gasp. She saw herself, but not as she was now. This version of her was older, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with age and wisdom. She was standing in the same forest, but it looked different, healthier, more vibrant. Animals moved freely around her, not afraid but curious, accepting. She was teaching a group of children, showing them how to listen to the voices of the forest. You see yourself as the first human guardian, the bear explained. Not a bridge between worlds, but a teacher, someone who helps humans remember how to speak with us. The image in the pool shifted, showing Zara years later, surrounded by other humans who had learned the old ways. Forests around the world were healing. The balance was being restored, and the darkness was nowhere to be seen. It's beautiful, Zara whispered. But what's the catch? What's the sacrifice? The pool showed her one more image, and this one made her heart break. She saw herself saying goodbye to everything she had ever known in the human world. Not just her empty apartment and meaningless job, but any chance of a normal human life. Marriage, children, growing old in the conventional way, all of it would be impossible for someone who lived between worlds. You would have to stay in the forest, the bear said gently. Forever. You would live longer than ordinary humans, sustained by the forest's power, but you would be alone in a way that few people can understand. The humans would fear you for your abilities, and the animals would always see you as partially human. You would belong fully to neither world. Zara stared at the pool, watching the images fade and reform. And if I don't agree, if I don't take on this role, then the ritual is our only option, and I would lose you completely within a year. The voice came from Lily, but when Zara turned around, she gasped. Lily was changing. Her form was flickering between the child Zara had met and something else, something wilder. Her eyes were the eyes of a wolf, then a hawk, then human again. The source is affecting you, the bear said sadly. Being here is reminding your body of what you truly are. Not human, not animal, but something in between. If we stay much longer, you'll lose your human form entirely. Is that what happened to the others? Zara asked. Were there others like Lily? Many over the centuries. Children who were lost or abandoned, who came to live with us. Most eventually chose to become fully animal, losing their human selves entirely. Lily is the only one who has managed to maintain her dual nature for so long. Lily's form stabilized, but Zara could see the effort it was costing her. I don't want to lose myself, Lily said, her voice small and frightened. But I don't want to lose you either, and I can't bear to watch Mama Bear die. The mother bear moved closer to both of them, her presence comforting despite her massive size. There is one more option, she said quietly, but it would require both of you to make sacrifices. What do you mean? Lily could return to the human world, live the life she was meant to live before she came to us. She would age normally, but she would retain some of her abilities, enough to help bridge the gap between humans and animals. And you, Zara, could take my place as the guardian of this forest. Zara felt her heart stop. Take your place? What does that mean? It means I would pass on my consciousness, my memories, my connection to all living things. You would become the mother bear, in a sense. You would keep your human mind, but you would also have all of my knowledge, all of my power. You could fight the darkness more effectively than the ritual ever could. But what happens to you? The bear's eyes grew sad. I would finally be allowed to rest. I have lived for over 200 years, watching over this forest, protecting the balance. I'm tired, little human. So very tired. Lily made a sound that was half sob, half howl. No, Mama, I won't let you die. There has to be another way. Death is not the end, little one. It's simply the next journey. And if my death can save not just this forest, but all forests, then it's a good death. The pool began to bubble and churn, its light growing brighter. On the cavern walls, the symbols were pulsing faster, as if responding to some urgent signal. The darkness has reached the heart, the bear said urgently. We're out of time. You have to choose now, Zara, the ritual, the guardianship, or becoming the new mother bear, but you have to choose. Zara looked at Lily, who was flickering between human and animal forms more rapidly now. She looked at the magnificent bear who had given her entire life to protecting others. She thought about the empty existence she'd left behind in the city, the meaningless routine that had driven her to seek something more. But before she could speak, something unexpected happened. The pool erupted in a fountain of crystalline water, and from its depths rose a figure that made all of them freeze in shock. It was Elena, the previous tenant of the cabin, but she looked different. Younger, more vibrant, her eyes glowing with the same inner light as the pool. You forgot about me, Elena said, her voice carrying the music of running water. You forgot that I already made the choice you're struggling with. Zara stared at her in disbelief. Elena, but Ruth said you left, that you moved across the country. Elena smiled, and when she did, flowers bloomed in her hair. My human self left, yes. The part of me that was afraid, that couldn't understand what was happening. But my spirit stayed here, in the source, learning what I needed to learn to help. You became one of us, the mother bear said wonderingly. But how? You weren't chosen as a child like Lily. Because I chose myself, Elena replied. When I realized what was coming, what was threatening the forest, I came here and gave myself to the source completely. I've been learning, growing, becoming something new, and now I'm ready to fulfill my purpose. Elena stepped out of the pool, and Zara could see that she was no longer entirely human. Her skin had a translucent quality, and vines and flowers seemed to grow from her very being. She was beautiful in a way that was both earthly and otherworldly. The darkness isn't just a natural force, Elena explained. It's been created by human actions, by the breaking of the ancient connections between people and nature. It can only be defeated by someone who understands both worlds completely and who has the power to heal the rift between them. What are you saying? I'm saying that neither you nor Lily has to make the ultimate sacrifice. I already have, but I need your help to complete the healing. All three of us, working together, can create something stronger than any ritual, more powerful than any individual guardian. The bear's eyes brightened with hope. A trinity, three consciousnesses working as one. Exactly. Lily represents the innocent connection between human and animal. Zara represents the bridge between worlds, and I represent the sacrifice willingly made for love of all living things. Together we can not only heal the heart, but create a new kind of protection that will last for generations. Zara felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth spreading through her entire being. What do we have to do? Elena smiled and extended her hands to both Zara and Lily. Take my hands, and trust me. Let me show you what we can become together." As their fingers touched, the world exploded into light and sensation. Zara felt her consciousness expanding, touching every living thing in the forest, feeling their fears and hopes and dreams as if they were her own. She could sense the mother bear's ancient wisdom, Lily's pure connection to the animal world, and Elena's deep understanding of the forces threatening them all. And in that moment of perfect unity, she knew exactly what they had to do. But as the three women joined hands around the source, something went terribly wrong. The cavern began to shake violently, and the glowing symbols on the walls started flickering like dying candles. The mother bear roared in alarm, a sound that echoed through the underground chamber like thunder. "The darkness!" Elena gasped, her luminescent form beginning to dim. "It's found us. It's trying to corrupt the source itself." Black tendrils of shadow began seeping through cracks in the cavern walls, moving like living smoke toward the sacred pool. Where they touched the stone, the ancient symbols went dark, their light extinguished forever. The water in the source began to turn murky, its crystal clarity clouding with an oily darkness. "That's impossible," Lily cried, her form stabilizing back into her child appearance as fear overrode the source's transformative effects. "Nothing evil can enter this place. Grandma Rose told me it was protected by the oldest magic." Elena's face was grim as she watched the encroaching shadows. "The oldest magic, yes, but this darkness isn't just evil. It's something much worse. It's the absence of connection itself, the void that exists when all communication between living things breaks down completely." Zara felt the warmth she'd experienced moments before being slowly drained away, replaced by a cold emptiness that made her soul ache. "How did it find us?" "Because we brought it with us," Elena said quietly. "Not intentionally, but—" "Zara, when you first arrived at the cabin, what were you feeling? What had driven you to seek isolation in the forest?" Zara thought back to those first moments stepping out of the moving truck, remembering the overwhelming sense of disconnection and loneliness that had consumed her. "I felt empty, alone, like I'd lost the ability to connect with anyone or anything. And that emptiness, that disconnection, it's exactly what feeds this darkness. You've been carrying a piece of it without knowing it, and bringing you here gave it a way to trace our location." The shadows crept closer to the pool, and where they touched the water it began to bubble and steam. The mother bear positioned herself between the darkness and the three women, but even her massive presence seemed small against the advancing void. "But I don't understand," Zara said desperately. "If I brought it here, if I'm the reason it found you, then maybe I should just leave. Maybe that would protect—" "No," Lily interrupted fiercely. "That's exactly what it wants. It wants to separate us, to make us feel isolated and alone. That's how it grows stronger." Elena nodded urgently. "Lily's right. The only way to fight this kind of darkness is through connection, through unity. But we need more than just the three of us." She looked toward the mother bear, who was still standing guard against the approaching shadows. "We need her too. And we need something else. Something I hadn't counted on." "What?" "We need the others. All the others who have been touched by this place, who carry pieces of the old connection within them." As if summoned by Elena's words, new voices began echoing through the cavern. Human voices, calling out from the passages above. Zara recognized one of them immediately. Ruth Henderson's practical, no-nonsense tone cutting through the darkness. "Zara, are you down there? We saw the lights from the road." "Ruth?" Zara called back. "How did you find us?" "The whole forest is glowing." Ruth's voice was closer now, coming from one of the tunnel entrances. Animals have been gathering at our house all night, leading us here. They seem to think we can help somehow. More voices joined Ruth's, her husband Tom, and others Zara didn't recognize. But as they emerged from the tunnels into the cavern, she realized with shock that she did know some of them. They were people from her old life, her old city. Her ex-husband David was there, looking confused and frightened but determined. Her former co-worker Sarah, who had always been kind to her. Even Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who had helped her pack her belongings. "How are you all here?" Zara asked in amazement. "We started having dreams," David said, his voice shaky but sincere. 3 nights ago, all of us started having the same dream about you in danger, about a forest that needed help. The dreams got stronger each night until we couldn't ignore them anymore." Sarah nodded vigorously. "We all met at the airport by accident. Everyone was booking flights to Pine Valley without really knowing why. It was like something was calling us here." Mrs. Patterson, despite her 70-plus years, looked energized by whatever had brought her here. "I've been having dreams about forests my whole life, dear. Dreams about a time when people and animals could speak to each other. I never thought they meant anything until now." Elena's form brightened as more people entered the cavern. "Don't you see? The Source has been calling to everyone who has ever felt truly connected to another living being, everyone who has ever experienced real love or compassion. The darkness may have found us through Zara's pain, but the light has found us through the connections she's made throughout her life." The shadows paused in their advance, seeming to hesitate as the cavern filled with more human presences. But they didn't retreat. Instead, they began to whisper, not with voices but with feelings of despair and isolation that pressed against everyone's minds. "It's trying to remind us of every time we've felt alone," Lily said, pressing her hands against her ears, even though the whispers weren't audible. "Every time we've felt like no one understood us, like we didn't matter." Zara felt the darkness pulling at her own memories. The day her marriage had ended, the countless nights she'd eaten dinner alone, the growing sense that she was invisible to the world around her. But then she felt something else. David's hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I made you feel alone. I got so caught up in my own problems that I forgot to see you. Really see you." Sarah stepped closer, taking Zara's other hand. "You were never invisible to me. You were the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who brought soup when people were sick. You connected all of us to each other even when you felt disconnected yourself." One by one, the people who had been drawn to the cavern began sharing memories, not of loneliness and isolation, but of moments of true connection. Ruth talked about the day she'd helped an injured deer, and felt, for just a moment, that the animal understood her gratitude. Tom described watching his children learn to communicate with their pet dog in ways that went beyond words. David remembered the early days of his relationship with Zara, when they could finish each other's sentences and share thoughts without speaking. As each memory was shared, the shadows retreated a little further. The water in the source began to clear, and the symbols on the walls started glowing again. But Elena was shaking her head. "It's not enough," she said urgently. "These memories are beautiful, but they're from the past. The darkness feeds on the present moment, on current feelings of isolation and despair. We need something happening right now, something immediate and powerful." The mother bear suddenly moved, stepping away from her guard position to approach the group of humans. Most of them instinctively backed away, but she moved slowly, deliberately, making it clear she meant no harm. "She wants to show us something," Lily translated, though Zara realized she could sense the bear's intentions herself now. The great creature approached Mrs. Patterson, the eldest of the group, and gently nudged her with her massive head. The old woman's eyes went wide, but instead of fear, her face filled with wonder. "Oh my," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "Oh my dear, you've been carrying so much sadness." To everyone's amazement, Mrs. Patterson reached out and placed her weathered hand on the bear's forehead. Immediately, both of them began to glow with the same inner light that emanated from the source. "She's been alone for so long," Mrs. Patterson said, tears streaming down her face. "Protecting everyone but never able to rest, never able to simply be loved for who she is rather than what she does." The connection between the elderly woman and the ancient bear sent ripples of light throughout the cavern. Other people began approaching cautiously, and as each person touched the bear or was touched by her, new connections formed, not just between human and animal, but between human and human, creating a web of understanding that had never existed before. David approached Zara hesitantly. "I can feel what you felt," he said wonderingly. "All those years when I thought you were fine, when I thought you didn't need me to really listen. I can feel how lonely you were." "And I can feel how overwhelmed you were," Zara replied, reaching out to touch his face. "How much pressure you put on yourself. How afraid you were of not being good enough." The shadows in the cavern began to writhe and hiss, their whispers becoming more desperate. They were losing their grip on the human hearts they had been trying to corrupt. But Elena's expression remained troubled. "There's still something missing," she said. "The darkness is retreating here, but it's not defeated. It's just moving to attack somewhere else. Somewhere we can't protect." "Where?" Lily asked. Elena closed her eyes, her connection to the source allowing her to see beyond the cavern. "It's moving toward populated areas, cities, towns, places where millions of people are living in isolation, despite being surrounded by others. If it reaches them—" "The loneliness epidemic," Sarah said suddenly. "That's what this is about, isn't it? All the studies showing that people are more isolated than ever, despite being more connected through technology. The rising rates of depression and anxiety, the feeling that no one really knows us anymore." Elena nodded grimly. "The darkness doesn't just feed on isolation, it creates it. It breaks down the ability to form genuine connections, making people feel like they're shouting into a void even when they're surrounded by others." "So, how do we stop it?" Ruth asked practically. "We can't bring everyone in the world down to this cavern." "No," Elena said slowly, "but we might be able to bring this cavern to them." She gestured toward the source, which was now glowing so brightly it was almost difficult to look at directly. "This isn't just a pool of water, it's a focal point, a place where the energy of connection is concentrated. If we could expand that energy, spread it outward, like a broadcast," Tom said, his engineering background showing. "You're talking about using this place like a radio transmitter, sending out the energy of connection to everywhere the darkness is trying to take hold." "Exactly. But it would require all of us to contribute, to pour our own capacity for connection into the source. And once we do that—" Elena hesitated. "What?" Zara asked. "Once we do that, we won't be able to take it back. We'll all be permanently connected to each other and to this place. Not physically, you'd be able to go back to your normal lives, but emotionally, spiritually. You'd always be able to feel each other's pain and joy, always know when someone in the network needed help." "That sounds wonderful," Mrs. Patterson said immediately. "I've been alone since my husband died, the idea of never being truly alone again. But it also means never having complete privacy," Elena warned. "Never being able to hide your true feelings from the others. Some people can't handle that level of intimacy." Zara looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people who had traveled hundreds of miles because of dreams they couldn't explain, who had trusted something beyond logic to bring them to this place. David, who despite their failed marriage had still cared enough to answer the call. Sarah, who had always been there with quiet support. Ruth and Tom, who had welcomed her into their community without question. "I think," Zara said slowly, "that maybe the world needs more people who are willing to be truly seen and known. Maybe that's how we fight the kind of loneliness that the darkness feeds on." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Even David, despite their complicated history, stepped forward. "I'm in," he said simply. "If it means helping people feel less alone, if it means stopping this darkness from spreading, I'm in." Elena smiled, and for the first time since Zara had met her, she looked truly hopeful. "Then let's begin. Everyone join hands around the source. Lily, you and the mother bear anchor the animal connections. Zara, you anchor the bridge between worlds. And I'll anchor the sacrifice that makes it all possible." As they formed a circle around the glowing pool, Zara felt a moment of uncertainty. What about after? What happens to us when this is over? "I don't know," Elena admitted. "This has never been tried before. We'll be creating something entirely new, a network of human connection that spans the globe, powered by the oldest magic in the world. We might become something more than human, or we might simply become the most human we've ever been." The mother bear moved to stand beside Lily, and as they joined the circle, Zara felt the first stirrings of what they were about to unleash. It was like standing at the edge of an ocean, feeling the pull of infinite possibility. "Are you ready?" Elena asked. Zara looked around the circle one more time, seeing not just the faces of the people she cared about, but catching glimpses of their true selves, their fears and hopes and dreams, all laid bare. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. "Ready," she said. But as they began to pour their combined energy into the source, something unexpected happened. The pool didn't just grow brighter, it began to sing. A harmony that was part human voice, part animal call, part something altogether beyond the natural world. And as the song grew stronger, Zara realized that they weren't just fighting the darkness. They were about to transform the entire world. The song from the source grew louder, more complex, weaving together every voice in the circle, human and animal alike. Zara felt her consciousness expanding beyond anything she had ever imagined possible. Through the network forming around the glowing pool, she could suddenly sense not just the people in the cavern, but thousands, then millions of other souls across the globe who were crying out in loneliness. A teenager in Tokyo, sitting alone in her room despite being surrounded by the busiest city in the world. An elderly man in New York, forgotten by his family, feeding pigeons in the park because they were his only companions. A mother in São Paulo, overwhelmed by responsibility and feeling like no one truly understood her struggles. "I can feel them all," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Everyone who's ever felt invisible, everyone who's ever wondered if they matter." The energy flowing through the circle intensified, and Zara watched in wonder as the source began to overflow. The luminous water didn't spill onto the cavern floor. Instead, it rose like liquid light, forming streams that flowed upward through the air itself, reaching toward the surface world above. "It's working," Elena breathed, her form now so bright it was like looking at a star. The connections are spreading. Through her expanded awareness, Zara could sense the streams of light emerging from the forest, spreading like roots across continents. Wherever the light touched someone who was truly alone, truly desperate for connection, something miraculous happened. Not a voice in their head or a supernatural visitation, but something far more subtle and profound. A sudden, unshakable knowing that they were not alone, that somewhere in the world other people cared about their well-being. The teenager in Tokyo suddenly had the courage to call her grandmother, whom she hadn't spoken to in months. The elderly man in New York found himself approached by a jogger who stopped to ask if he was okay, leading to the first real conversation he'd had in weeks. The mother in Sao Paulo felt a gentle touch on her shoulder and turned to find her neighbor offering to help with the children. "Look," Lily said in wonder, pointing toward the cavern walls. The ancient symbols weren't just glowing anymore. They were moving, rearranging themselves to show new patterns, new connections forming in real time. It was like watching a living map of human empathy spreading across the world. But even as the miracle unfolded around them, Zara felt something changing within herself. The connection network wasn't just linking her to others, it was transforming her at a fundamental level. She could feel Elena's deep peace, Lily's wild joy, the Mother Bear's ancient wisdom, all becoming part of who she was. "The darkness," Tom said suddenly. Where did it go? Zara had been so focused on the spreading light that she hadn't noticed. The shadows that had been threatening the source were gone, not defeated or driven away, but transformed. Where the tendrils of emptiness had been, she could now see threads of understanding. The recognition that even loneliness served a purpose, driving people to seek the connections they truly needed. It wasn't evil, she realized aloud. The darkness was just lost connection, the absence of love looking for love. And now it's found what it was searching for, Elena said softly. The mother bear made a sound that was part growl, part purr, wholly contented. Through the network, Zara could feel the great creature's relief. For the first time in 2 centuries, she wasn't carrying the burden of protection alone. The responsibility was shared now among all of them, distributed across a web of connection that spanned the globe. "What happens now?" David asked. "Do we stay here? Do we go back to our lives?" Elena smiled, and though her form was still made of light and water and growing things, her expression was purely human. "We go back, but we take this with us. Every person we've touched tonight will touch others. Every connection we've made will make new connections possible. The network will grow organically, naturally, the way the best things always do. And us?" Zara asked. "What do we become?" "Whatever we choose to become," Elena replied. "The magic doesn't control us. It serves us. We can live ordinary lives with extraordinary connections, or we can dedicate ourselves to being bridges between the human and natural worlds. The choice is ours, every day, every moment." Zara looked around the circle one more time, seeing not just faces but souls, not just individuals but a family bound together by something deeper than blood or circumstance. She could feel their love, their fears, their hopes for the future, and she knew that no matter what happened, no matter how far apart they might travel, they would never truly be alone again. "Thank you," she said to the mother bear, who had started it all by leaving a simple gift on her porch. "Thank you for bringing me home." The bear's response came not in words but in a feeling. Pure, unconditional love mixed with the deep satisfaction of a job well done. Around them, the source had settled back into its pool, but its light continued to pulse gently, a heartbeat of connection that would continue as long as there were beings capable of love in the world. As they made their way back through the tunnels toward the surface, Zara felt a hand slip into hers. It was Lily, no longer flickering between forms, but solid and steady and beautifully, completely herself. "Are you going to stay in the forest?" Zara asked her. Lily smiled, and in that smile, Zara could see both the ancient wisdom she'd gained from her years with the animals and the simple joy of a child who had finally found her place in the world. "For a while," Lily said, "but maybe not forever. There are other lonely children out there, other people who need to know that they belong somewhere. I think I'd like to help them find their way home, the way you helped me find mine." When they emerged from the cavern into the pre-dawn darkness, the forest around them was alive with gentle light. Every tree, every flower, every blade of grass seemed to glow faintly from within, as if the entire ecosystem had been awakened to its own inherent magic. And in the distance, through the trees, Zara could see her little cabin waiting for her. But it didn't look lonely anymore. It looked like what it had always been meant to be. Not a place of isolation, but a sanctuary where lost souls could rest before finding their way back to the light. As the first rays of sunrise painted the sky, the mother bear appeared one last time at the edge of the clearing. She looked healthier now, her fur thick and lustrous, her eyes bright with renewed purpose. But when Zara met her gaze, she sensed something different. A readiness, a peaceful acceptance of whatever came next. The great creature padded over to where Zara stood and gently nuzzled her hand. In that touch, Zara felt a final gift, the understanding that love never truly ends, it only changes form. The mother bear had protected the forest for 2 centuries, but now her love would live on in the network they had created, touching lives across the world in ways she could never have imagined. "Rest well, old friend," Zara whispered. The bear looked once more around the circle of humans and animals that had gathered to witness the new dawn, then turned and walked slowly into the forest. But she didn't disappear. She simply became part of the light that now lived in all growing things, her presence a blessing that would endure for generations to come. Zara stood on her porch as the others prepared to return to their lives, but she knew they weren't really leaving. Through the network of connection they had forged, they would always be present for each other, always ready to offer comfort, support, or simply the quiet companionship of shared understanding. Helena appeared beside her, still translucent but more solid than before. "Any regrets?" she asked. Zara thought about the life she had left behind, the empty apartment, the meaningless job, the growing sense that she was sleepwalking through her days. Then she thought about the life stretching ahead of her, full of connection, purpose, and the daily miracle of knowing that she was exactly where she belonged. "None," she said firmly. "Not a single one." As the sun rose fully over Pine Valley, casting its golden light across the transformed forest, Zara felt a deep peace settle in her chest. She had come here looking for a fresh start, but she had found something much more precious. She had found home. Not just in a place, but in a network of souls who would never let each other walk alone in the darkness again. And somewhere in the forest, in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between breaths, the mother bear's love continued to flow through the world, carrying the simple but revolutionary message that had started it all. You are not alone, you are not forgotten, and you are infinitely, eternally loved. The chart that had brought them all together lay folded carefully on Zara's kitchen tray.